You can watch the best parts of this series at MedCircle.com. Over 70% of US adults have experienced a traumatic event at least once in their lives. That's over 220 million Americans. And 20% of those people go on to develop the debilitating illness known as post-traumatic stress disorder. So we traveled to New York to sit down with leading psychiatrist and PTSD expert, Dr. Judith Joseph. Welcome to the MedCircle original series, PTSD from Traumatic Events, Ending the Silent Epidemic. Dr. Judith, we just finished filming our 6 episode, I think it's 6 episodes, right guys? 6 episode series on PTSD and traumatic events. Thank you for providing all of this information. What was your favorite part of the series?
My pleasure. I think my favorite part was the sharing part where we both shared our own experiences.
Yes.
Because I think that we can talk a lot about scientific methods and diagnoses and so forth, but people really connect to stories, and that authenticity, I think, will bring people closer to understanding what's happening with them at home.
And I think for you, it gives you an understanding, not only are you an expert on this, but if you've experienced a traumatic event and whether or not you were diagnosed with PTSD, you've still gone through something traumatic. And that gives you some insight into, what someone with PTSD has gone through, or at least made that a little bit closer. My favorite part of the series was how actionable your advice and tips were. I always say mental health is complicated, but the solution should be simple, and you gave us a simple solution time after time. I love that. Let's define for the people watching this what exactly PTSD is.
So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and it is a category of 4 things that people experience after they have either experienced something life-threatening for themselves, or they've witnessed it happen to someone that they know or care about. And so people can experience avoidance. And that can take several forms. So they may not want to think about the experience or avoid things that remind them of that experience, or people that remind them of that experience. For example, if somebody was attacked or raped, they may avoid that place where they were attacked, or they may avoid people that look like their attacker. Also, another hallmark is re-experiencing that traumatic incident. So they may have that re-experiencing in different ways, such as nightmares that are very vivid, that make them feel as if they're back in that situation, or they could be wide awake and have flashbacks, and they truly believe that they're in that situation where they're traumatized.
That's key there. They truly believe. There's no difference between this experience and the original expurience, both from their own personal feelings, but actually neurologically. What's going on in their brain. And you used some big words, okay? Amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, but you made it easy to understand. So I really appreciate that. You explain things very simply. When people experience this traumatic event, what's so frustrating for me, because I read all the comments on our videos, is that they don't know what to do. And so they go through this traumatic event. They are feeling terrible. They think they may have PTSD. They don't know what to do, so they do this. They search, they pay, and then they pray. They search for something on the internet. They pay the first person that will offer them hope, and then they just hope that what they've done is correct. And oftentimes, that leads to the wrong diagnosis, so you get the wrong treatment. You end up spending a lot more money and a lot more time on the wrong treatment or the wrong therapist. And most importantly is you don't get the recovery that you deserve. So you have fixed that model, at least for this PTSD series, to help people move in the right direction. What is their first step that they take after that traumatic event to start to recover?
So I think you're absolutely correct. And I'll add to that. When they search and then they find the wrong treatment, it's deflating. It makes them feel even more hopeless than they started off feeling. So I think that the first step is asking for help. And I think that shame and stigma often get in the way of asking for help. So sharing is key, because if you don't share, how are you going to get help?
That's right.
And also, people tend to self-medicate. I can't tell you how many times people tell me that they go to the pharmacy and they pick up over-the-counter medications to help them to alleviate some of that anxiety and the poor sleep. And so self-medicating does have consequences. They can actually, some medications can make your symptoms worse.
Yeah. And there's a lot of myths around PTSD, and I don't think people understand how truly debilitating this is when it is untreated. Talk about what someone's life looks like when they have untreated PTSD.
One of the most memorable cases that comes to mind is this man who was robbed several years ago. And he's a very intelligent man. He's a professional. He's logical. However, he saw someone walking outside of the home, and something about the way this person walked or looked just triggered him. And he truly believed that this person was going to rob him. And he had a full-blown flashback, a re-experiencing that we talked about, where he believed that this man was going to rob him. And his wife described it as like him just like dissociating. She said that his eyes just kind of went to glass, grabbed a gun, went to the window, and he was going to shoot this innocent civilian.
Because he believed that this was happening all over again.
I mean, that is a severe instance, and it can happen. And the longer that these symptoms of trauma go untreated, the more likely that they are to get to this point where it is life or death.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that I've seen some pediatric cases of complex trauma where a little girl that I treated was just headbanging, and no one understood what was going on. And she was dissociating to a point where she didn't feel like she was a part of her own body, so she didn't feel that pain. And people thought, well, this is either schizophrenia or mental retardation, and it just did not add up. And so when trauma goes on for so long and it's not treated, the chances of things getting better become more difficult, more unlikely. And so we want to get the right diagnosis, we want to get the right treatment in place so that the person has the best outcome.
And not surprising, but people with PTSD are often dual diagnosed with depression, substance abuse, or addiction. It's incredibly pervasive.
Yeah.
I think, did you say in the series that 80% of people with PTSD also have a co-occurring mental illness?
So not 80%, but they're more likely compared to people who don't have.
Oh, more likely, yeah.
They're 80% more likely to have like something like depression or anxiety or a substance abuse illness or comorbid condition compared to people who don't. Also, we also talked about how experiencing trauma is very, very common. And so when you look at people who have extreme PTSD, it can look like schizophrenia, it can look like bipolar disorder, but we have to remember that those things are less likely. The incidence of those things happening in our population, they're smaller than PTSD. So always go for the thing that's more likely to happen and then peel back. And that's where having the skills and a trained clinician involved is important.
Well, here was a good reminder from the series when I asked about the signs that you should look out for. And I said, well, those sound like the same signs of depression. So how do you know if it's PTSD or depression? And you gave me this great reminder. Let's take a look right now. I'm trying to figure out if my husband or my wife is having PTSD, depressive episode. This is difficult now because those all look the same.
They
do. What do I do?
So as a supportive, loving person in this person's life, it's not your job to diagnose.
Yes. Can you say it louder for the people in the back? It's not your job to diagnose.
My husband accuses me all the time. He's like, you're diagnosing me. I'm like, it's not, I am totally not capable of that.
It might be your job to diagnose. You can actually do it.
I'm like, I have too much baggage in the back of here. It's not going to be a good diagnosis. I mean, when you love someone and you're so invested, you can't.
It's such a great reminder to know it is not the supporter's job to do any of the diagnosing. That's your job over there. So you've got to make sure you know your role as a supporter, and you do that so perfectly throughout this series. And remember, if you want to watch this series, you can go to MedCircle.com, become a subscriber, and get access to that series and others. And I hope you do if this is something that is relating to you either on a personal level or you know somebody who has or may have PTSD. Now, Dr. Judith, you brought up something that I had never heard of, but I was really excited to talk about it. It's called workplace PTSD. We did an entire episode on it, but tell the viewers what that is.
So when you think about PTSD, you think that your life is in danger or someone that you know their life is in danger. You don't think about anything else. And I'm hoping to change that. So what I've found in my practice is that when people truly believe that they can lose their job, when their livelihood is threatened, they can have some of those symptoms of PTSD that other people have. They can have avoidance, they can have hypervigilance, they can have nightmares. All of the physiological things that you see someone who survived something traumatizing, let's say their life being threatened, they can have those same symptoms if they believe that their livelihood is being threatened.
And you're the pioneer on this.
I am.
The reason you haven't heard about this and I haven't heard about this is because she, Dr. Judith, is the one pioneering this, doing the research, coming out with a book, all on this concept of workplace PTSD. And I will applaud you on how you handled my questions, because I really brought some skepticism to that. I said, what about the people who just think, well, our society is getting weaker? What about the people who think this is a joke and we're just trying to diagnose everybody? And you gave such great, poignant answers that really made me even see PTSD in a different way. So again, wonderful, wonderful job. Now, what are you most excited for, and what do you hope people will get, the big takeaway that people get after watching your series?
So I think that people have a lot of information from online resources, and not all online resources are vetted like MedCircle. So it's so important to have real clinicians, real experts, putting the right content out there, because if you don't have the right content, then it's like the blind leading the blind. So I think it's so important to have vetted experts talking about these topics, because then you're not really getting the help that you need. Yeah,
I've learned that a lot. I look back at my mental health journey and kick myself, because if I had known what I know now, going through what MedCircle provides, because although I work for MedCircle, I am also a user of MedCircle. If I knew what I knew back then, I would have had fast results. I would have spent way less money because I wouldn't have been in treatment so much. And I think I would have lived an even happier life. I've lived a great life, but I think it would have even been happier. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm Kyle Kittleson, and remember, whatever you're going through, you got this. Thanks for watching. Your next step is to go to MedCircle.com and finish watching this series. There you can also access other series and get actionable advice and simple explanations. Continue your mental health journey at MedCircle.com, and I'll see you there.